Hi, my name's Caroline Stocks of Pig Health Today, and we're speaking to Matt Sturos, who's a veterinary pathologist at the University of Minnesota. Matt, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Now, today we're talking about Strep suis. Can you explain a little bit about the current situation of the disease in the US and how problematic it is for US herds?
So Streptococcus suis is a commensal bacteria that virtually all pigs have. Certain strains can cause problems for farmers and production. It seems that there's increasing amounts of strep suis problems, septicemia, sudden deaths, CNS or central nervous system type lesions that are occurring due to Streptococcus suis. It is a problem for our producers today, and something that we address at the diagnostic lab quite frequently.
So, what are the signs of Strep suis and how is it spread between animals?
The exact mechanism of spread, most commonly we think of it as a pig-to-pig transmission. There is the possibility that this bug could be transferred by other means, fomites, people bringing contaminated things into the farm. But for the most part, Strep suis is passed from pig to pig. The signs of infection, so pigs can be infected with Streptococcus suis and not have any disease associated with it. So if we were to check their nasal cavities or their tonsils for Strep suis, we would find it. It's not necessarily a problem for every pig. Those that do develop disease, there's a few different manifestations. One is related to septicemia, so the bacteria gets from those epithelial surfaces up in the nose tonsil region and ends up in the blood. And so once it's in the blood, it can go many different places. One of those is the brain. And so it can cause meningitis. And when we see that manifestation, those pigs will usually have trouble standing. They may be down or recumbent, and eventually, as it progresses, they will start paddling and then die. So that's the CNS signs that people will often talk about, or central nervous system signs. Other signs would be related to, again, spread of those bacteria through the blood to distant sites. One of those would be in the joints, so arthritis or swollen joints. They may have difficulty walking. They don't want to get up. One thing that's we've seen a little bit more of as we're seeing different strain types moving through is just a sudden death. So these are pigs that are healthy, doing well, good pigs, they're called a lot of times, and then they're found dead. So those are, again, due to septicemia, but there won't be any clinical signs that you see prior to death.
And is it correct that it tends to affect weaning piglets more than other pigs in the herd?
Strep suis tends to be a problem in young pigs, so you might see a little bit in farrowing. Most of the time you're going to see like a nursery problem, especially if you're mixing sow sources in a nursery. These with pretty much any disease pattern, when you mix young pigs that have variable levels of immunity, you get increased replication and circulation of these different pathogens, and Strep suis is no different. So most of the time you're going to see it maybe late farrowing and into the nursery phase. It's not a common, late finishing problem or a sow problem, but can cause problem in any age pig if they have other stressors involved.
And are certain strains more virulent or problematic than others?
Yes, there are more pathogenic or virulent strains that are capable of causing more severe disease. Some of that has to do with the existing immunity in the herd. So if the herd has a particular serotype of Strep suis and a new serotype is introduced, they may have issues for a period of time. It's not necessarily to say that that particular genotype or strain of bacteria is more pathogenic than the one they already had. It's just different and they don't have the immunity for it. There are some strains that are highly associated with disease, virulence.
So turning to diagnostics now, how has the pathogen traditionally been identified?
So traditionally, and even still today, the method of diagnosis for Streptococcus suis is aerobic culture. It grows very well on blood agar plates and is not one of the fastidious bugs that we have trouble growing. So we at the lab here, we use MALDI-TOF, which is a mass spectrometry method of looking at the proteins, and that'll tell us what type of bacteria, genus and species. And then there are PCRs that are available to look for detection of Streptococcus suis. We don't use those, at least here in Minnesota, as a routine diagnostic, just because it's much easier to grow. It's almost faster, depending on what type of sample processing you have to do to get your PCR done. But that is an option as well.
In your talk at the Layman conference, you talked about genome sequencing for identification. How does that help in terms of identifying the disease and potentially treating it?
So the sequencing in and of itself is not going to help tell you whether or not the pig has disease. That's going to be, in order to tell that the animal has disease, it's going to be important to do a necropsy, so a postmortem examination. The sequencing would come after you have a bacterial isolate and would help to characterize that bacteria for help on the farm to figure out, is this the same one that I was dealing with last month, or is it the same one I was dealing with 6 months ago, or is this something new that's coming in? And then it also helps to provide information about that, especially if it's a new introduction, to know what to put a label on that particular strain. We also use that information to look for virulence genes, or virulence associated factors, and those all help the farmer and the veterinarian to develop a management plan.
So if the genome testing identifies a different strain than the farm or the veterinarians have previously been managing, how then does their management plan have to change?
So just because they find one that is different than what they've had in the past, I would hesitate to say you need to change everything right now. Some of the strains that we identified, they're not pathogenic, or they're unlikely to be a routine pathogen. They were probably just an opportunist, that the pig had some other stressor and that bacteria got to get into the systemic tissues. There are some where we know, looking at it, we've seen it in other herds, that's a particularly virulent genotype, and that would say, well, it might be in your best interest to do some additional changes, and that might be an autogenous vaccine, so that way they don't have disease, or as much disease caused by that particular bug. They're going to try to get a homogeneous immunity across their sows, across their gilts, and give those pigs the best chance. If you are a large producer, you have many farms, you have a lot of flows that are going through, it's important to know what you're dealing with as you're moving your pigs. So you may, knowing what the genome information is from, say, 1 or 2 different flows, you may be careful about mixing those, or make sure you don't mix them so that you don't cause problems in those downstream pigs. It may not be economically feasible in every situation for every producer, but it's an important part of disease management for the industry for sure, and as I see it increasing as we go forward.